Hello YouTube, my name is Nero. Today we have some more Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered. Welcome back to some Search and Destroy, this time using the M40A3 here on the map Vacant, and happy Mother's Day to all of you. I know my demographics, I know my stats, I know my figures. I know that roughly 5% of my lifetime views come from females, and I know that about 80% of that 5% are females over the age of 18, so chances are, once we weed out all the people that lied about their age and gender here on YouTube, there is at least one mother watching this video, so happy Mother's Day to you specifically and everybody else as a whole. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to discuss Call of Duty World War II. We're pretty much just counting down the days until E3, where we'll be able to actually see this game in action about 1 month's time. At the time of this video going live, we are going to be able to see Call of Duty World War II at this year's E3. I am very excited for that. A lot of our questions are going to be answered, but until that time, we are left to speculate, and speculation, ladies and gentlemen, is something that I've gotten rather good at. Now, when it comes to Call of Duty World War II, not a ton is actually known at this point. We know a bit about it. We know it's going to basically revolve around American soldiers in the European theater, specifically the 1st Infantry Division. We're going to be following this group throughout their campaign in World War II and kind of seeing it through their eyes. Now, this is pretty awesome, right? I'm excited for it, but it's a rather specific setting for a World War II game, right? Most World War II games, especially in the Call of Duty series, tend to span over the entire war and show conflicts through many different pairs of eyes on multiple fronts, right? Call of Duty World War II is going to be much different. It is going to be entirely, or at least nearly entirely, Americans versus Germans, with, of course, a couple of side Allied and Axis forces being thrown in there from time to time. I think the intent here is for them to tell a very focused story about a small group of soldiers, kind of similar to Band of Brothers, give you that kind of feel where we're going to know everything about every single soldier in our group here. And so when people die, it's going to be a lot more gut-wrenching. When people do well and they succeed, it's going to be even that much better because we're actually going to care about these characters. We're going to have time to develop thoughts and feelings on them as compared to other World War II games where like you play as like a random American soldier and you just basically go through the war, right? It's going to be a bit more focused, a bit more... I think it's going to be better, honestly. I think from a story perspective, Call of Duty World War II sounds freaking awesome, but I have to wonder what the game's multiplayer is going to be like, because by limiting the campaign to primarily featuring Americans, Germans, and some side things like the French and stuff like that, they are indirectly limiting the game's multiplayer, because everything that happens in the multiplayer, at least with the base, like, shipped game, that all derives from the campaign, right? They set up the campaign, they set up the story, the factions, the weaponry, they set up everything with the campaign, and then from there, they make their maps and the multiplayer based off stuff that happens in the campaign. The factions that fight each other are based off stuff in the campaign. The weapons, of course, are based in the campaign. It's only once DLC and supply drops and all that stuff actually gets implemented that they start, you know, expanding their horizons a little bit in terms of map settings and weapon variety and stuff like that. So I have to wonder, how varied is the Call of Duty World War II multiplayer going to be as a result of this super hyper-focused setting? I have no doubt that it's going to be good, right? I don't want it to come off like I think COD World War II is going to be boring or anything like that. I have no doubt that the game's multiplayer is going to be full of variety and wonderfulness, but I'm just pointing out that the setting is very focused in Call of Duty World War II, and I would love to pose the question to all of you: do you think that this focused setting allows for multiple Call of Duty World War II games in the future? Because think about it, right? If they were to make a World War II game similar to Call of Duty World at War, which tells stories from Stalingrad, Okinawa, Berlin, France, and everywhere else, what are they supposed to do with the next game, right? What are other developers supposed to do if they choose to make their own World War II game? World War II is the biggest conflict in human history, but if they're looking to be historically accurate, there is only so much source material for them to pull from. That's why I'm happy, personally, that Call of Duty World War II is actually hyper-focusing on the 1st Infantry Division for the United States in the European theater, because that gives Treyarch, who is making Call of Duty 2018, free reign to create their own World War II game on a different front with a different group if they so choose. I'm not saying every single game in the future has to be World War II, but I'm just saying this opens up the possibility for Treyarch's next game to be World War II. If they don't want to do it, maybe Infinity Ward's game to be World War II, maybe Raven Software, if they get pulled on as a 4th developer. It just opens up free reign for all the other developers. They're basically saying, all right, we want this very hyper-focused, specific part of the war. We want to focus on that, and that opens up the possibilities for everybody else to be able to make whatever they want want also regarding Call of Duty World War II. I think that's a freaking awesome thing, because I would love to see, personally, another World War II game that focuses on the Pacific Theater, right? The Pacific Theater, the Americans versus the Japanese. I think that's a very interesting part of the war. I find it fascinating. Like, just the other night, I was reading about Japanese holdouts. So for those that don't know, Japanese holdouts were soldiers from the Imperial Japanese Army that either refused to surrender after the war was over and after Japan had surrendered, or they simply did not know that the war was actually over, and they ended up hiding on islands and in jungles conducting guerrilla warfare against the locals at the time. Like, this guy, I'm bad with pronunciation, a lot of people know that, but I think his name was like Hiro Onoda or something along those lines. He was stationed in the Philippines just a couple of months before the war ended. When he first arrived, they gave him the orders to never surrender under any circumstance, or to never take his own life. So he can't commit suicide, he can't surrender, he needs to persevere and keep on fighting, and that's exactly what he did. He lived in the jungles and the mountains of the Philippines until 1974, when he was discovered, and then Japan sent over his former commanding officer, who issued him the order to stand down. He never surrendered. Like, almost 30 years after World War II ended, he was still hiding in the jungles, conducting guerrilla warfare with his Arasaka, harassing the police and the local villagers and stuff like that. Like, it's absolutely insane, all the great stories that come out of World War II. I mean, this guy lived in the jungles until 1974, thinking World War II was still happening, right? How freaking awesome is that? I love learning about World War II. I love learning about the battles and the people that participated in it, and I'm hoping that Call of Duty World War II is not just a one-off game. I'm hoping that they're not like, you know, let's go back to World War II just for one game, then continue on business as usual with, you know, jetpack games and stuff like that. I'm hoping that at least somewhat frequently, not every year, but at least somewhat frequently, we can get World War II games here in the Call of Duty series, because I love learning about the entire medium as a whole, right? Whether it's Japanese holdouts or the 29th Infantry Division, who was the other division that was storming Omaha Beach alongside the 1st Infantry Division that we're going to be playing as. Like, I find it fascinating. There's so much history, so much to learn, so many stories to tell. It's a war that affected the entire world, right? Every single one of us, whether we know it or not, we have been directly affected by this war. It's ingrained in our collective culture, our collective history. I mean, just this past week, a great example of this, I bought an album for one of my favorite bands, Lucero, and it was an older album they released in like the year 2000 or something like that, called The Attic Tapes, and on there's a song called The Blue and the Gray, which is talking about the 29th Infantry Division in World War II, because the lead singer, Ben Nichols, his grandfather was part of the 29th Infantry Division. He was there when they stormed Omaha Beach, and the song is about him. And I'm like, out of freaking nowhere this happens. I buy an album for one of my favorite bands, and on there is a song about World War II. It is part of our collective history, culture, and heritage. I freaking love World War II. People think it's weird when I say that, like, oh, you love that 60 million people died. Like, those people, I'm sorry, but you sound emotionally retarded when you say stuff like that, right? I love World War II because I'm fascinated by it. It's the biggest conflict in human history. There are so many stories to tell. And as I say, it's a conflict that forever changed the course of human events. And so as a result, I'm fascinated by it. And I think it's a very cool setting for video games, especially Call of Duty, especially because, you know, Call of Duty was based off World War II. That's what founded the Call of Duty series. I'm so happy they're going back to the past. I'm so happy they're going back to their roots this year. And regardless of whether or not it's a good game, the game is going to sell very well. I mean, Call of Duty sells well every single year, but look what happened with Battlefield 1. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I haven't played it as much as I thought, but Battlefield 1 sold so many copies just based off the fact that it was a World War I game. Well, think of how much Call of Duty is going to sell based off the fact that it's going to be a World War II game. It's going to be ridiculous. So regardless of how good the game is mechanically or weapon balance or, you know, unlock systems or DLC models or anything like that, the game is going to sell very well. I'm just hoping that it does well enough that people want to see more of it, right? Because if people don't want to see more World War II, they're not going to make more World War II. That is how Call of Duty operates these days. People seem to think that, like, Call of Duty is based off of trilogies because we had the 3 Modern Warfare games and the 3 Black Ops games. Well, it turns out, this is actually coming from Eric Hirschberg, the CEO over there at Activision, It turns out that Call of Duty games are based off of how well they actually do. If a game has legs, they run with it. If it does not, it's a one-off game and they start fresh with something different. This is why Call of Duty Ghosts had one game. This is why Advanced Warfare had only one game. This is why likely Infinite Warfare is only going to have one game as well. Instead of having trilogies, they're putting out these games. If they seem to gather attention, they seem to have legs, as he says, then they continue on with it and they make it into a series. So I'm hoping this becomes a series. I'm hoping that World War II becomes a staple once again in the Call of Duty series. Not every single year. Obviously, that would be a bad thing. I think we need to take baby steps. One game at a time. Doesn't need to be every single year. I'm just saying more than one every 9 or 10 years would be fantastic. And I'm very happy that with their very hyper-focused setting, Sledgehammer left the door open for other developers to step in and make World War II games if they so choose. I think that's pretty freaking awesome. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about that down there in the comment section below. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Once again, let me know your thoughts. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.